Hey everyone, and welcome to Making Music. I'm Mark, and I'm so excited to be here with Lisa for another deep dive into music history.
Hi everyone, great to be here.
Today we are going super old school with Roy Bennett's Uma breve historia da musica, which translates to A Brief History of Music. Don't worry though, if you don't speak Portuguese, this book is all in English.
Yeah, and it's part of this cool series called Cadernos de Música da Universidade de Cambridge, which basically means Cambridge University Music Notebooks. They are designed for education, so they make things really clear. Perfect for our deep dive.
They really are. So get ready to have your mind blown wide open as we go on a journey from medieval chants to, well, the music we know and love today.
It is going to be quite a ride through time. But before we get started, have you visited our website yet? It's makingmusicforever.com, all one word.
Yes, head over to makingmusicforever.com where you can find all our episodes as well as bonus content. We also love to hear from our listeners, so drop us a line. But for now, let's get back to the music.
Sounds good to me.
So I think before we jump into specific periods of music, we should answer a fundamental question. What exactly is musical style? Like, what makes medieval chant sound so different from a Baroque concerto?
That's a great place to start. When you break it down, it's all about the ingredients that make up a particular style, kind of like a recipe.
Okay, I like that,
Yeah.
A musical recipe. So hit me with those key ingredients. What are the elements that define a musical style?
Well, first and foremost, you've got melody. It's the tune, the part you'd probably hum along to, the sequence of notes that make up a musical phrase. It's what makes a song catchy and memorable.
Right, the main course, so to speak. But what about the side dishes? What gives a melody depth and makes it more than just a simple tune?
That's where harmony comes in. Harmony is all about the chords and how those notes work together to create a sense of richness and emotion. A minor chord might give you a spooky feeling, while a major chord feels happy and bright.
Yeah, I get that. It's like how a movie soundtrack can totally change the mood of a scene just by changing the harmony. But what about the beat, the pulse that makes you want to move?
You're talking about rhythm, the heartbeat of the music. Rhythm is how those sounds are organized in time, the pattern of long and short notes, the accents, the pauses. It can be simple and predictable like a waltz, or complex and syncopated like jazz.
So rhythm is what dictates how we physically feel the music. That makes sense. What else do we need to consider?
Now, think about how you can tell the difference between a flute and a trumpet, even if they are playing the same note. That's timbre, the quality of sound that makes each instrument unique.
Oh, right. Like, a flute sounds airy and light, while a trumpet has that bright, brassy quality. Even if they're playing the same pitch, you can instantly tell them apart because of their timbre.
Exactly. It's what gives each instrument its own personality, and composers use timbre to create different colors and textures within a piece of music.
It's like an artist using different colors on their palette.
Okay, so I've got the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, the timbre. What about the overall structure of a piece? How does that fit into the musical recipe?
That's where form comes in. Form is the architecture of a musical piece. It's how the different sections are organized, the repetitions, the variations, and the overall design. Some forms are really simple, like verse chorus in pop music, while others are incredibly complex, like a sonata form, which we'll delve into later.
I'm intrigued already. We're going to have so much to unpack. So what's our final ingredient in this musical stew?
Last but definitely not least, we have texture. Think of texture as the layers and interplay of sounds in a piece. Is it a single melody line like a solo voice, or are there multiple melodies happening at once?
Oh, so it's like the difference between a single singer and a choir, or a solo instrument versus a whole orchestra. Exactly. It's about how those sounds interact to create a sense of density or sparseness, or how they create different sonic landscapes. So these are the core elements of musical style, the things that make a piece sound the way it does.
Amazing. I feel like I'm already learning so much, and we haven't even started talking about specific periods yet.
We have a lot of ground to cover, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that our book and this deep dive will be focusing on Western music. The tradition that kind of developed in Europe around the 9th century onwards.
Right, because there are so many rich musical traditions around the world, each with its own unique story.
Absolutely. But for today's deep dive, we'll be sticking to the Western classical tradition.
So just to give our listeners a roadmap, what are the major periods we're going to be hitting on this musical road trip?
We'll be starting in the medieval period, roughly from around 500 to 1400 AD. Then we'll move through the Renaissance, the Baroque, the Classical, the Romantic, and finally the 20th century. Each period has its own distinct flavor and its own set of musical innovations that build on what came before.
Okay, so buckle up, everyone. We're about to embark on a musical time machine.
This is going to be exciting.
Let's start with the medieval period. I'm picturing castles, knights, and maybe some monks chanting in a dimly lit monastery.
You're not far off. Imagine yourself in a grand cathedral, the air filled with the smell of incense, and all you hear is this single, unaccompanied melody echoing through the vast space. That's monophonic chant, the heart and soul of early medieval music.
So no catchy dance tunes in the medieval club scene.
Not quite, but things did start to get a bit more interesting when composers started experimenting with polyphony, adding a second voice to the chant. It was a pretty radical idea at the time.
I bet. So they were basically like, hey, let's shake things up a bit and add another layer. Did they have a special name for this two-part harmony?
They called it organum. Basically, you'd have one voice singing the original chant melody and the other voice moving in parallel motion, kind of shadowing the main melody, but creating this beautiful, otherworldly effect.
I can imagine that sounding really cool in those big reverberant cathedrals.
Yeah.
Were there any specific places where this new sound was taking off?
Absolutely. The Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris became a hub for organum in the 12th and 13th centuries. Composers like Léonin and Perotin were basically the rock stars of their day, creating these incredibly complex and beautiful organum compositions.
Wow, the medieval rock stars. They must have really pushed the boundaries of what music could be.
They did, but organum wasn't the only new development in medieval music. We also see the rise of the motet and the conductus.
Okay, those are new ones for me. What were the motet and the conductus all about?
The motet was particularly interesting because it often used different texts sung simultaneously. So you might have one voice singing a Latin religious text, while another voice sang a secular text in French, all happening at the same time.
Wow, that sounds incredibly complex. I can barely sing one melody at a time, let alone two different ones in different languages.
It was a real feat of musical craftsmanship. And the interplay of different texts and melodies created this fascinating tapestry of sound and meaning.
So it was like they were weaving together different threads of thought and emotion through music.
Exactly. The conductus, on the other hand, was a bit more straightforward. It had a single text for all the voices and was often more rhythmically lively, which probably made it popular for dancing or other secular occasions.
So if the motet was a complex tapestry, the conductus was more like a catchy tune for a medieval party.
You could say that. But even though vocal music dominated the medieval period, instruments were still part of the scene.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Were they just using instruments to accompany singers, or were there any purely instrumental pieces back then?
We don't have as much information about instrumental music from the medieval period, but we know they used instruments like the viol, the rebec, and the psaltery, probably both for accompaniment and solo playing.
I'm trying to imagine what those instruments sounded like. It must have been a very different sonic world from what we're used to today.
It was. But even in that very different world, we can see the seeds of innovation and creativity that would eventually lead to the music we know and love today.
It's amazing to think how these early developments in music laid the foundation for everything that came after.
Exactly. And speaking of everything that came after, we're about to enter a period of incredible artistic flourishing, the Renaissance.
The Renaissance. Now things are getting really interesting. I'm ready for a rebirth of musical creativity. But before we go there, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment to explore the wonders of Renaissance music, so don't go anywhere.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back, music lovers. I hope you're ready for more because we're about to step into the Renaissance, a period of incredible artistic and intellectual rebirth.
Ah, the Renaissance. I always think of it as this explosion of creativity, like a giant leap forward after the Middle Ages. But how did that spirit of innovation translate into music?
Well, in a lot of ways, actually, one of the biggest changes you hear is this rise of imitative polyphony, where multiple melodies are interwoven like threads in a tapestry.
So it's not just voices singing in unison or simple harmonies anymore, but each voice having its own melodic line.
Exactly. And the way those lines interact, how they imitate each other, create these incredibly rich and expressive textures. Think of it like a conversation between different voices, each with its own personality, but working together to tell a story.
I'm starting to see how this Renaissance spirit of individuality comes through in the music. So who were some of the big names in Renaissance polyphony, the composers who were really pushing the boundaries?
Oh, there were quite a few. Josquin des Prez, for example, he was a master of this style. His music is full of emotion, drama, and these incredible interweaving melodies. You know, he was so famous in his time that Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, even said, "Josquin is the master of the notes. They must do as he wills. Other composers must do as the notes will.
Wow, that's high praise coming from Martin Luther. So Josquin was like the Renaissance rock star of his time.
Absolutely. He was incredibly influential. And then you have composers like Palestrina, an Italian composer known for his incredibly pure and ethereal choral music, especially the music he wrote for the Catholic Church.
Oh, right. Palestrina, wasn't he a key figure in the Counter-Reformation?
He was indeed, and his music really reflects that focus on clarity and simplicity. It's all about smooth, flowing vocal lines, very consonant harmonies, avoiding anything too jarring or dissonant.
So it's like his music was trying to create a sense of spiritual purity and order.
That's a great way to put it. But the Renaissance wasn't just about these big names and their contributions to sacred music. It was also a time of incredible vocal diversity, with different regions developing their own unique styles.
Oh, tell me more about that. I love the idea of this musical tapestry with threads from all over Europe.
Well, in Italy, you had the madrigal, which was all about setting these passionate Renaissance poems to music. And the composers didn't just set the words, they used the music to really enhance the emotions and imagery of the poetry.
Wait, so they were like painting pictures with sound?
Exactly. It's called word painting, and it's super cool. For example, if the text mentioned a bird flying upwards, the melody might literally ascend on the scale. Or if it talked about descending into darkness, you might hear the music moving downwards.
That's so clever.
Yeah.
It's like adding another layer of meaning to the words through music. What other vocal styles were popular in Renaissance Europe?
Well, in France, you had the chanson, which was known for its lighter, more lyrical style, often focused on themes of love and nature.
Oh.
Imagine those romantic poets strolling through a garden, serenading their beloved with a beautiful chanson.
Now that sounds delightful. It's like a musical postcard from Renaissance France. So we've got Italian Passion, French Romance. What about England? Were they getting in on the musical action?
Of course. England had the air, a solo song with lute accompaniment. It was all about elegant melodies and beautiful poetry, very much in line with the refined and artistic atmosphere of the Elizabethan era.
It's amazing how each region had its own unique sound, like different dialects of the same musical language.
And let's not forget Germany. This is the time when the Lutheran chorale starts to take root, which were these simple hymn-like tunes that became central to Protestant worship. It was a stark contrast to the more elaborate polyphony favored by the Catholic Church.
So the Renaissance was really a melting pot of musical styles, blending together sacred and secular, local and international influences. It sounds like a really exciting time to be a music lover.
It was. But all this focus on vocal music doesn't mean instruments were completely forgotten. Actually, instruments were starting to gain more prominence during the Renaissance.
Oh, really? I thought instruments were still mainly used to accompany singers. Were they starting to break free and play on their own?
Exactly. We see the rise of consorts, which were small groups of instruments playing together. Imagine a Renaissance party, not just singers entertaining the guests, but also a group of musicians playing viols, flutes, and lutes, adding a rich instrumental texture to the festivities.
So instruments were moving beyond just providing background music and taking center stage.
They were. And keyboard music was also having a moment. Composers started writing pieces specifically for instruments like the virginal and the harpsichord, exploring their unique sound and capabilities. This laid the groundwork for the incredible keyboard virtuosos of later eras.
It sounds like the Renaissance was a real turning point for music, not just in terms of new styles, but also in the growing importance of instruments. It feels like we're on the cusp of something big.
You're right. And that something big is the Baroque period, a time of dramatic shifts in music, mirroring the dramatic changes happening in society and politics.
The Baroque period. Now we're talking. I'm picturing those extravagant palaces, elaborate costumes, and music that's just as over the top. Bring on the drama.
You got it. The Baroque period is all about drama, grandeur, and a sense of awe-inspiring spectacle. And one of the biggest changes that ushered in this new era was the rise of monody.
Monody. That sounds intriguing. What's so special about this new style?
Imagine a solo singer taking center stage, pouring their heart out with a dramatic melody accompanied by just a few simple chords. That's monody in a nutshell. It's a shift from the complex, intertwined melodies of Renaissance polyphony to a more focused, emotionally charged style where the singer's voice takes center stage.
So it's like the Renaissance composers were saying, okay, everyone, quiet down. It's time for the soloist to shine.
Exactly. And this simple accompaniment that supports the soloist's melody, it had a very specific name, the basso continuo.
Basso continuo, it sounds almost like a secret musical code. What exactly was involved in this continuous bass.
Typically, it involved two instruments working together. You'd have a bass instrument like a cello or bassoon laying down the foundation with a steady bass line. And then you'd have a keyboard instrument like a harpsichord or organ, filling in the harmonies and adding embellishment on top.
So it's like a musical conversation between the bass and the keyboard, creating this rich and supportive backdrop for the soloist to soar over.
A perfect analogy. And this new style, this focus on monody and the expressive power of the solo voice, it was about to give birth to a whole new form of musical storytelling, opera.
Opera. Now we're talking. Talk about drama, passion, larger-than-life characters. I can already hear those powerful voices echoing through the opera house.
And you wouldn't be wrong. It all started in Italy around the turn of the 17th century. A group of musicians and intellectuals known as the Florentine Camerata. They were fascinated by the dramatic storytelling of ancient Greek theater and wanted to bring that back to life.
So they were basically looking to the past to create something completely new. That's fascinating.
It is. They believed music should serve the text, really enhancing the emotions and drawing the audience into the story. And thus, opera was born.
I can see how this new style, monody, with its focus on a single voice conveying emotions, would be perfect for opera. But were all operas created equal? Did different styles emerge?
Oh, absolutely. Italian opera, with its emphasis on beautiful singing and showcasing those incredible vocal acrobatics, quickly spread throughout Europe. Imagine those soaring melodies, those heart-wrenching arias. It was all about capturing those raw, powerful emotions.
So Italian opera was all about passion and vocal fireworks. What about other countries? Did they develop their own take on opera?
Definitely. French opera developed its own distinct style, incorporating lots of dance, elaborate costumes, and a sense of grandeur that reflected the opulence of the French court. It was a spectacle for both the eyes and the ears.
So Italian opera was a feast for the soul, and French opera was a feast for the senses. I love how each country put its own spin on this new art form. But wasn't there another form of dramatic vocal music that emerged during this period? Something a bit more, religious?
You're thinking of the oratorio. It shared a lot of the dramatic elements of opera, big choruses, arias, recitatives, but instead of being staged, it was performed as a concert piece. Often, oratorios told biblical stories, using music to bring those stories to life.
So it was like opera's more serious, church-going cousin? Still dramatic, but with a focus on sacred themes instead of love and intrigue.
Exactly. And while these large-scale vocal forms were making waves, the Baroque period also saw the development of some incredibly intricate instrumental music.
Intricate in what way? Were they just getting fancier with the melodies, or was there something more to it?
One of the defining characteristics of Baroque music was counterpoint, the art of combining multiple independent melodies. It's like a musical puzzle, where each melody has its own voice, but they all fit together perfectly, creating this rich and complex texture.
That sounds incredibly complex. Were there any specific forms that really showcase this contrapuntal mastery?
The most impressive and arguably the most challenging form of Baroque counterpoint was the fugue. Imagine a single theme, called the subject, introduced by one voice and then imitated by other voices, creating this complex web of interwoven melodies.
So it's like a musical game of chase, with the theme bouncing back and forth between different instruments. It sounds mentally exhausting to write, let alone play.
It definitely required incredible skill and ingenuity, and one composer who absolutely excelled in this form was Johann Sebastian Bach.
Ah, Bach, a true musical legend. His music always seems to strike its amazing balance between mathematical precision and raw emotion.
A perfect description. He was a master of counterpoint, taking those intricate melodies and weaving them into these breathtaking musical tapestries. But fugues weren't the only thing happening in the instrumental world. Composers were also exploring a whole range of other forms, including the suite, the sonata, and the concerto.
Okay, let's unpack those. What exactly was a Baroque suite?
Imagine a collection of dances, each with its own distinct character and tempo. It was like a musical journey through different moods and rhythms, showcasing the variety and elegance of Baroque dance music.
So it's like a musical sampler platter, giving you a taste of everything the Baroque dance scene had to offer.
Exactly. And then you have the sonata, which was typically written for a small group of instruments, often two violins and a basso continuo. It usually had multiple movements, contrasting in tempo and mood, like a miniature musical drama unfolding through different chapters.
So the sonata was all about creating a journey for the listener, taking them through a series of contrasting emotions and musical ideas.
Precisely. And finally, we come to the concerto, a form that was all about showcasing the brilliance of a solo instrument against the backdrop of an orchestra.
Ah, the concerto. The ultimate battle between soloist and orchestra, a showcase of virtuosity and dramatic tension.
Exactly. The solo instrument would engage in this back and forth dialogue with the orchestra, highlighting both its technical brilliance and the expressive possibilities of the Baroque style. And speaking of brilliant Baroque composers, alongside Bach, we can't forget Antonio Vivaldi, known for his vibrant concertos, especially the Four Seasons, which is still a crowd pleaser today.
Vivaldi's Four Seasons, a true classic. It's amazing how vividly he captures the essence of each season through music.
And then there's George Frideric Handel, a master of both opera and oratorio, known for his majestic choruses and his ability to tell stories through music. These composers, along with so many others, really shaped the soundscape of the Baroque era, leaving behind a legacy of incredible music that continues to captivate audiences centuries later.
It's mind-blowing how much music evolved during the Baroque period. From the intimate emotionality of monody to the grand spectacle of opera, from the intricate complexities of the fugue to the dramatic dialogues of the concerto. It was truly a golden age for music.
It certainly was. But the spirit of innovation didn't stop there. Get ready for another shift as we enter the classical period, a time where elegance, clarity, and a new sense of restraint take center stage.
The classical period, I'm already feeling a sense of calm and order just thinking about it. It's like the musical equivalent of a perfectly manicured garden with everything in its place.
A very apt description.
Wow.
So let's step into this refined and elegant world as we explore the music of Haydn, Mozart, and the early works of Beethoven. And welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into Western musical history.
We've made it to the classical period. I'm ready to swap out the drama and grandeur of the Baroque for something a little bit more refined. A little more order and elegance.
Well, you're in the right place. The classical period is all about clarity, balance, and restraint. You could almost say it's like the musical equivalent of a perfectly symmetrical garden.
Okay, I like that. A well-manicured musical garden.
Yeah.
So, who are the master gardeners in this era, the composers who really shaped the sound of the classical period?
We have a trio of absolute giants: Haydn, Mozart, and the early works of Beethoven. Each one brought their own unique genius to the table, but they all shared a commitment to creating music that was elegant, sophisticated, and emotionally engaging.
Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, those are some serious heavy hitters. Let's start with Haydn. What was it about his music that made him stand out?
Well, Haydn was incredibly prolific. I mean, the guy wrote over 100 symphonies, not to mention countless string quartets, concertos, operas, you name it. But he was also incredibly innovative, particularly when it came to developing the symphony as a musical form.
Ah, so Haydn was like the architect of the symphony, laying down the foundations for this grand orchestral form.
You could say that. He really established the four-movement structure that became standard for symphonies, with each movement having its own distinct character and tempo.
So Haydn sets the stage, and then along comes Mozart, who takes those foundations and, well, does what Mozart does best, right?
Exactly. I mean, Mozart had this uncanny ability to write melodies that were just effortlessly beautiful and memorable. His music is so full of grace and charm, but also this incredible depth of emotion. And the way he uses harmony, it's like he was a magician, conjuring up these rich and complex soundscapes that somehow never feel cluttered or overwhelming.
I love how you describe him as a magician. It really captures that sense of effortlessness and wonder that you hear in his music. But of course, we can't talk about the classical period without mentioning Beethoven.
Absolutely not. Beethoven is this fascinating figure, a bridge between the classical and romantic periods. You can definitely hear the influence of Haydn and Mozart in his early works, but there's also this intensity, this raw energy and passion that starts to creep in, hinting at the romantic storm that was just around the corner.
So Beethoven was like the rule breaker, pushing the boundaries of the classical style while still respecting its foundations.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to experiment with form, harmony, and even the size of the orchestra. He really expanded the possibilities of what music could express. And his influence on later composers, it's immeasurable. I mean, his symphonies, his piano sonatas, his string quartets, they're still considered masterpieces, and for good reason.
It's amazing how these three composers, each with their own distinct personalities and musical styles, managed to define an entire era.
But it wasn't just about individual composers, right? Were there any specific techniques or forms that were particularly important in the classical period?
Oh, for sure. One of the most significant developments was the rise of sonata form. It basically became the blueprint for a lot of instrumental music during this period, especially for things like symphonies, sonatas, and concertos.
Okay, remind me, what exactly is sonata form again? I'm a little fuzzy on the details. So think of it as a three-part structure: exposition, development, and recapitulation. In the exposition, the composer introduces the main musical themes. It's like setting the stage for a play, introducing the characters and the main plot points. Then comes the development section, where things get a bit more chaotic. The composer takes those themes and starts to play around with them. You might hear them fragmented, transformed, or even combined in unexpected ways. It creates a real sense of tension and excitement. And finally, we get to the recapitulation, where those original themes return, but this time they're all in the home key, creating a sense of resolution and stability. It's like all the loose ends are tied up and we're left feeling satisfied and complete.
Ah, that makes more sense. It's like a musical journey with a clear beginning, middle, and end. But I imagine even within that basic structure, there was still a lot of room for creativity and variation.
Absolutely. Composers could really make sonata form their own, using it to explore a wide range of emotions and ideas. And speaking of exploring new possibilities, we also see some exciting developments in instruments during the classical period.
Oh, right. Didn't we see the rise of a certain keyboard instrument that would become a cornerstone of Western music?
The piano. You got it. The piano's development was a game changer. Its ability to create both loud and soft sounds, its wide range of notes, and its expressive potential made it the ideal instrument for composers like Mozart and Beethoven. They wrote extensively for the piano, pushing the boundaries of what was possible on the keyboard.
Wow, it's incredible how the evolution of instruments can shape the course of music history. So we've got sonata form, we've got the piano, and as we approach the end of the classical period, we're already starting to see the seeds of a new musical style taking root: romanticism.
That's right, the seeds are definitely there. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today's deep dive.
That's okay. We've covered a lot of ground, from the haunting chants of the medieval period to the elegance and refinement of the classical era. It's been an incredible journey, and I feel like I've learned so much about the history of Western music.
I'm glad to hear it. It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you and our listeners.
And for those of you who are eager to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Roy Bennett's Una breve historia da musica. It's a fantastic starting point for anyone who wants to delve deeper into this fascinating subject. And don't forget to visit our website at makingmusicforever.com for more episodes, bonus content, and a chance to connect with us.
We love hearing from you.
So, until next time, keep those ears open, keep those minds curious, and keep making music.